Okay, good morning and welcome to our latest session for the buyer, Zoom debates. Today we're heading off down to Bordeaux and grabbing a boat and going over to the right bank of Bordeaux for our debate this morning. And really an opportunity to analyse and explore under the title of the evolution of the right bank, to look at some of the different appellations there and what's happening in Bordeaux, and taking that back to the UK, and with our panel of buyers looking at what the perception of Bordeaux currently is in the UK market, and the kind of in the individual appellations where they sit in terms of quality, value, perception, and demand, I suppose. So the idea really is to explore Bordeaux and put that into context first, and then we'll look at the different appellations. To help us, we're very pleased to join us from Bordeaux is Damien Landor, who's the general manager of Chateau Gaby in Canon-Fronsac, and is also the president of the wines of Fronsac and Canon-Fronsac. So welcome, Damien. Nice to have you here.
Nice to meet you, everybody. Hello.
I probably didn't pronounce your name right, did I? But
no, that's what it was. Perfect.
Okay, all right. I'll believe you. All right, okay. And we're also very pleased to have a great mix of buyers, consultants, wine merchants who are going to help us look at Bordeaux through their eyes. So in no particular order, we have Francis Bentley, who's the wine buyer at LWC Drinks. Nicola Graham is the head of content at LiveX. Angela Mount, wine buyer consultant. Laura Clay, who's wine educator. And then we have Will Hill, who's the club wine buyer at Honest Grapes, and Dan Kirby, who's wine consultant, MW students, and back working at Adnams on a maternity leave. So nice to have you all. Thanks for joining us. Perhaps, I mean, I've sort of given you a rough introduction each, but if you wouldn't mind, if I perhaps just go to each in turn, if I sort of say to you Bordeaux, in particular at the moment in the market, what does that mean to you in terms of what you're looking to buy, where that sits in the market compared to, say, 5-10 years ago? Go on, Francis, I'll come to you. I'll start with you. I'll come to you first, if that's okay.
Okay. Well, where we are at LWC with Bordeaux is that it's quite polarized. We sell quite a lot of the high-end stuff, and we do well with it, especially in the major city centres, and in some of the national accounts as well. We're selling a lot of very expensive, very nice, very classic Bordeaux, and then we're selling a huge amount of more entry point stuff. The middle ground doesn't seem to be as interesting to people in the on-trade. Now, LWC only sell into the on-trade. We do not sell retail at all. So that is very much what we're seeing reflected in restaurants and bars. There is an interest in those two ends. We're not really seeing much being sold in the middle, and we're selling I think it's the same for everybody, but white is not really happening either. But in Bordeaux, that's what we're seeing right now.
Okay. And in terms of right bank, left bank, I mean, is that would you also see a distinction there between what's in demand and?
Interestingly, I was looking at our sales figures yesterday, and we're selling more right bank than left bank right now, and I don't really know why. So I'm interested to sort of taste these and understand a bit as to what it is that maybe is more appealing to people at the moment. Perhaps they're looking for that slightly more easygoing fruit. Perhaps that's what they're looking for. But I need to dig deeper as to why we're selling more right bank than left bank. It might be a pricing thing.
Okay, thank you. And Will, can I ask you? And I know you've only just moved over to Honest Grapes, haven't you? But
yeah, that's right. It's a new one for me here. I've only been at the job for about 4 weeks now. But we sell a lot of very high-end, kind of expensive almost like name brand Bordeaux, you'd kind of say. But what my focus is going to be on is kind of a lot more of the lower end stuff as well, because that's what my kind of background is. So I almost would echo what Francis has said about what's popular is the top and the bottom, whereas the middle is a little bit of a missing ground. particularly with whites as well. We actually do all right with the whites. And even at my last job, we were getting some entry-level whites and even some semi-sweet stuff in, which was moving at a decent pace. And I think a lot of that was to do with kind of independent promotions from like White Wines of Bordeaux and certain regions that get financing and help to come over and promote these certain things, which was a White Bordeaux promotion we did some months ago, but it was very successful for us. Interesting as well, a lot of stuff that's been popular for me for the last kind of 12 months and what I'm seeing at my job now is more satellite appellations, kind of lesser known kind of areas, or even just generic Bordeaux AOC kind of stuff, which is just to kind of fit that kind of value gap at the bottom end of the market, I suppose.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll explore a bit more in terms of those more lesser known appellations or more emerging appellations, is the right word. Dan, can I ask you, I mean, in terms of what you're seeing at Adnams and just generally in terms of your perception of Bordeaux?
Yeah, so I think I've been sort of at Adnams for 8 or 9 years. So it started in sort of 2009, 10-ish. And at the time, Adnams were really, really strong on Bordeaux, sort of seen as a really traditional merchant. And so, you know, our sort of claret range was really strong. And over the last sort of 8 or 9 years, that's hugely changed in terms of, you know, consumer perception of what Adnams do as a business and sort of where our strengths lie. But, you know, of our current range, about sort of 500 wines, you know, sort of 10% on my own label, and our Adnams claret sits at sort of 11 quid. And it's sort of the heart of our sort of Bordeaux range. So it's probably a little bit above that sort of average sort of Bordeaux superior range in terms of price wise. And then we sort of pepper everything around that. So there's bits and bobs from everywhere. But I mean, our sort of strengths at the Mo are in that sort of 10 to 18 quid price bracket.
Yeah.
And that's where people are. I think people see, in terms of our range anyway, they see the sort of go-to single varietal wines and wines that they may know. But most people tend to see Bordeaux as a sort of trade up from that. So we don't sort of play around too much in the sort of sub 10 quid Bordeaux everyday entry level stuff.
Okay.
That's particularly for retail. And then our sort of direct trade is again quite interesting. And, you know, most of our pubs are in sort of rural heartland East Anglia, so it's quite traditional customers. And so most of the tied and managed pubs have got a sort of, you know, mid-premium claret that does quite well, sort of ticks over. So it's really interesting that Adnams sort of made its name in the sort of traditional space, but Bordeaux is still doing relatively well for us in that sort of mid-price bracket.
Okay, good. And do you think people are looking to buy Bordeaux? I mean, what are the sort of the anchors that people are looking for? Do you think sort of like the appellations like Pomerol, Saint-Emilion? I
think the difficult thing with Adnams is that we sort of anchor each region and each sort of classic variety with an Adnams branded wine, and then sort of pepper everything else around that. So our Adnams wine is a Bordeaux Superior, which does really well for us at 11 quid. But I think in terms of what they're looking for beyond that are just things that are sort of juicy and approachable and classic and traditionally styled. And I'm not 100% convinced that our customers are shopping by appellation. They're shopping by sort of character and style in terms of Bordeaux. You know, they want that sort of classic fruit profile.
Excellent. And so, can I ask you, with your buying experience, how do you see, how have you seen Bordeaux evolve?
Well, first of all, I've just realised, and I do apologise, I've got a left bank poster behind me. The labels of that left bank first growth. So I just noticed that. Yes, I have some fairly straightforward views, as you would expect, Richard. Most of you know me, so before I moved into effectively writing and consultancy, and therefore advising to restaurants, I was at the helm of one of the big retailer in terms of heading up their wine buying for many, many years. And at the time, Bordeaux, the New World explosion had started, and it was gathering pace. But there's one thing that I always did, because own brand claret, and I joined Summerfield in, I think it was 1996. I was there until or just before 2010. Own brand Clabret was a cornerstone of the range. And I used to go out and I'd blend it once a year, I'd select it. I always headed for the right bank because I wanted wines or a wine at a given price point, so at entry level, house claret, as it were, which delivered and which was easy drinking and approachable. And it had to be a red wine that could be drunk young, because that's what my consumer base as a supermarket retailer were looking for.
Mhm.
So whether I ended up buying from right bank or left bank, I would say the Summerfield's claret always had around 70% Merlot. It was very much Merlot driven, softer, juicier fruit, more approachable, what my customers wanted. In more recent years, we're writing about it and also consulting to restaurants, the situation is slightly different. I totally agree with the points made already. I think there is entry level. I think most of the restaurants to whom I advise or have advised would have a Bordeaux by the glass. Bordeaux is a brand name in itself. We then get on to the debate as to whether the sub-appellations are brands. Bordeaux is a brand in the way that Rioja is a brand, in the way that Chianti is a brand. The consumer is not that familiar with the grape variety mix within that. I mean, I'd love to see Cabernet Franc, one of my favorite grapes, getting more of a starring role, because I think that's a beautiful grape. And, you know, maybe it's its time. I don't know. That's part maybe of the debate. I do think it's a generation thing as well. I think the younger generation don't understand. So if you're talking about millennials and now increasingly Generation Z, Bordeaux hasn't been classic part. You know, my parents drink Bordeaux. So I think there's a bit of a dichotomy. I think that the younger generation, or what's the one before millennials? If you're
Generation
born
Z.
in the 90s, whatever.
Gen Z, I
X.
think.
So someone like you know, somewhere in their late 20s, early 30s, who's aspirational, might invest, might want to drink expensive Bordeaux, which backs up to your point about the entry and the premium. If you look at the other end, I was at some press tastings recently, and 3 or 4 of the retailers are focusing very strongly on affordable Bordeaux. Okay, particularly Christmas. And I think also, of all of them, Saint-Emilion is a brand, but I think that's the only one that's recognised. And I think from a white perspective, Bordeaux Sauvignon has seen good growth as it has benefited from the phenomenon, which was Sauvignon Blanc, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, as an alternative, particularly during the short vintage. So that's kind of my top line summary of my views.
Excellent, thank you. That's brilliant. Well, yeah, well, it's interesting that you know, you've got similar themes coming through, and that whole softer tannin, ready to drink approach as well is interesting. Laura, can I ask you? I mean, obviously from when you're doing your wine tastings and doing your education classes, what's the sort of your take on Bordeaux? And
okay, so I'm an accredited Bordeaux tutor and have been since 2006. So I've actually seen quite. Obviously, it's the core part of my work, actually, talking about Bordeaux. And just to pick up on Angela's point and the generation thing, it's actually really exciting to bring Bordeaux to the younger generation, because it's like something new. It's like they've never heard of Bordeaux. It means nothing to them. So actually, I've been finding that thrilling to do. And certainly in the last 5 or 6 years, judging the Bordeaux Hot 50, for example, the quality of the entry-level Bordeaux is just amazing. And so where in the past people used to say, oh, Bordeaux is overpriced, even at the bottom end it's overpriced, it truly is not overpriced. There are some absolute bargains out there. I mean, lots. Very drinkable wines, very, not just drinkable, with some complexity and interest, and something different from the new world for the younger generation. And the older generation are coming back to these styles of wines, the more food-friendly wines, the more restrained wines, the wines with lower alcohol that aren't big fruit bombs. They are absolutely coming back to that. But we need to, get them to come back to Bordeaux. In terms of sort of name recognition, for me, since talking about Bordeaux for the last 15 or so years, Saint-Emilion is always one that people know. They absolutely have heard of Saint-Emilion. I've done tastings where I've said, shall we do Bordeaux or Saint-Julien? And people go, well, I want to taste the Bordeaux wine. Saint-Julien means nothing to them. Saint-Emilion means something to them. Less so with Fransac, but the satellites of Saint-Emilion, of course, benefit because they've got the name on there. And I agree with Angela, Bordeaux is brand. In terms of the whites, we'll remember that I did his white wine tasting for his previous company. I mean, I'm banging that drum all the time because I think it's an exciting, very, very exciting area in terms of quality and value for money, and something different. I mean, it's not different, but it's different for the consumer to try these wines. So for me, Bordeaux is definitely on the up, even if we're not necessarily seeing it in terms of trade, but certainly in terms of quality and value for money, it's definitely on the up. Oh, and the other thing I was going to say was when I'm consulting for people of usually of a certain age and with a certain fat wallet, where they want to buy wines from Bordeaux, to them it doesn't matter if it's left bank or right bank.
So, and I can ask, when you're teaching part of the educational approach, I mean, do you use the left bank, right bank as signatures as being? I mean, obviously they're very, but by the very nature of what they are what they are. But how do you approach those in terms of?
Well, we generally, if we're doing a sort of overall Bordeaux tasting, we want to cover every basis. So we'll do white, Bordeaux, Bordeaux Superior, left bank, right bank, court wines, sweet wines. We want to cover a rosé now as well. So we want to cover everything. If it's an introduction, just to show the diversity that Bordeaux does have, and also different price points. So we do want to show wines at £7 or £8, and then we want to show wines at £25, just to show, obviously we're not going massively higher, but just to show that Bordeaux does do, can suit every palate and every wallet.
Excellent. Nicola, can I ask you, I know you're from a LiveX point of view, you're looking at this in more of a kind of an overviewing of how, can you just, have you got any kind of thoughts on terms of where Bordeaux is sitting at the moment in terms of from an investment side of things?
Yes, so LiveX, just for anyone who doesn't know, is the London International Vintners Exchange. We're essentially the global marketplace for the wine trade. We have 620 merchant members who trade daily on our platform, and the data that we provide is based off the real-time activity of those merchant trades. So it's very reflective of, what the global trade are doing and how they're reacting with Bordeaux. Over the years, back in 2010, Bordeaux used to account for something like 95% of all the trades on the platform. Today, that figure's a lot lower. It's about 35%. But sorry, were you going to say something there?
No.
Okay.
Very surprised.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fine wine market has expanded hugely during that time. There's so many more regions now that are considered fine wines, and merchants also expanding their portfolios. There's a lot of reasons, for that. But even just within Bordeaux itself, not only has the market broadened, but it's also deepened. So for Bordeaux, we're seeing more wines from different regions trade. I was looking at Saint-Emilion, and back then it only accounted for about 5% of trades, whereas today it's around 14% of Bordeaux's total. So growth within Bordeaux is also improved as well. So it's fascinating to see, even just the number of brands that are trading. Again, looking at Saint-Emilion, back then it was about 47. Today it's around 81.
Right, interesting. And well, perhaps when we explore the right bank a bit more, we can go perhaps into some of those other appellations. David, I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but I thought it was important. Well, important as part of the debate, but also I think for yourself to perhaps hear different views from the panel. From your point of view, would you perhaps if you introduce yourself, obviously in your own chateau, but if you could perhaps give a bit of context to where Bordeaux sees itself and where the right bank sees itself in terms of the context of Bordeaux overall.
Yes, sure. So hello everybody. I'm Damien Landoir. I'm the manager of Chateau Gaby in Canon-Fronsac. I'm in Gaby since 25 years now. So I'm on the right bank since a long time. For me, the right bank is probably the part of Bordeaux where today it's less difficult as the other appellation. I'm talking about the big appellation like Bordeaux, Bordeaux Supérieur, and Médoc, Haut Médoc. I'm not talking about the Grand Cru Classé, the big wine, because I think we have the Merlot, and Merlot is very it's a very nice grape variety in terms of fruit, in terms of approachable wines. And we have also the Cabernet Franc, who is my favorite grape variety too, because I love the fineness, yes, of the grapes, and when you're blending it, it's making something very different in terms of wine with the Merlot. So I'm very positive for the future for the right bank, because we are very dynamic in terms of winemaking. We change lots of things since the last 20 years in terms of winemaking and enology, and also in the vineyards, because the most important for the quality is the vines. It's not really the cellar. So we work a lot on the vineyards, and we understand that people want something different. So since 10 years, lots of things change, and I'm agree with the few arguments you say, because people understand that there's some things to discover, rediscover in Bordeaux, and I'm very happy to be part of the movement now. Okay. I don't know if I answer your question, but it was just an introduction of today the atmosphere here are not very nice, not very good. People are a little bit down in terms of mood, and it's always nice to think about positive things for the future.
Okay, and obviously your particular position as well within the appellations. I mean, can you perhaps give some background to sort of like Fronsac and sort of Canon-Fronsac, and where that sits within the right bank? Because obviously the panel was sort of saying, Saint-Emilion, I guess Pomerol, these are in fine wines.
Sorry, Fronsac and Canon-Fronsac are on the other side of a little river called Isle. There's a big river called Dordogne, and there's a little one called Isle. And Pomerol and Saint-Emilion are on the right side of the river, and we are on the left side with a lot of hills. So there's the landscape are very there's a lot of elevation. So it's different in terms of terroir, because I tried to find the term relief. Sorry.
Topography.
Sorry. Topography. Thank you.
Very good.
And it's really interesting, because there's a big complexity in terms of terroir. The main grape variety are Merlot in Fronsac and Canon-Fronsac, but since few years we are planting more and more Cabernet Franc, mainly because the Cabernet was on the back of the property, and now we are moving the Cabernet on the top of the hills, put on the limestone, because it's pairing very well with the Cabernet Franc. And yes, there's something moving because we want to make wines approachable, that's the term, and more easy to drink, more fruity, and try to find the good combination for consumer. The other thing is, in Bordeaux, we are making wine with aging. So for me, it's difficult to think about drinking young Bordeaux, mainly in vineyards who are making wine with complexity. So looking after the yield, looking after the work on the vineyards, and after aging in barrels, for me, it's difficult to drink the wine very young. So that's why it's very interesting after to taste the 2010 and 12, because it's always a pleasure to drink old wine and see how they are very delicate, very fine, and the fruit stay. So so for me, Bordeaux is able to make fruity wine with light body, easy to drink, but the culture and the tradition of Bordeaux, it's aging and complex wine. So we just have to make it more approachable for people who wants to move to Bordeaux area.
And within Bordeaux, is there a sense that it's everybody is sort of team Bordeaux, and providing the whole region is doing well in exports, or is there very much a kind of a, you know, Fronsac wanting to have a bigger share of the voice, or, you know, and I mean, I guess by having different representative bodies, is it a case of someone like yourself being able to put more focus and to talk more about some of the sub appellations?
Are you talking about marketing, exportation, or
within Bordeaux itself, also when you're actually trying to tell the story of your own appellation?
Of our own appellation? So yes, the story of our own appellation is mainly driven by Brittany and Netherlands in terms of sales, in terms of wine knowledge. And if we are looking now what happened here, around 65% of the wine stay in France in the market, and 35% goes to exportation. And the top 5 of the country for exportation is it was China, no it's not, but it's UK, so it's a very important market for us. Belgium, America, US, and it's a main country for distribution for us. I don't think it is the same on each appellation. It's probably the same for all the regional appellation, but it's not the same for all the village appellation, sorry, but not for the regional appellation as Bordeaux or Bordeaux Supérieur or Médoc or Médoc. Yeah.
Okay.
There's two different markets, yeah.
Can I ask the panel? I mean, I know when we talked initially, you picked out obviously Saint-Emilion as being the most recognizable sub-appellation or appellation, if that's the right word. I mean, what's your thoughts in terms of how important it is to be promoting areas like Fronsac or for well, a from a trade point of view in terms of its understanding, but then how far that really matters when it comes to consumers?
I think sorry, can I jump in there? Sorry.
No,
was that to the panel, Rich, or was that to Damien?
No, it's to the panel, yeah.
Cool. So I think it's interesting, like when Laura's doing education, or when we're talking to customers on the shop floor about what the wines are, you know, for a lot of things on the right bank, you sort of start with Saint-Emilion and you get everything else out of there. But when you do that, I think quite often the perception is that those wines aren't as good as the Saint-Emilion wines. So there's this sort of change of narrative required in that those wines are always just as good. than sort of using Saint-Emilion as the sort of premium part of the right bank, and then everything else becomes a sort of sub-appellation, which sort of is implied that the quality isn't as good as Saint-Emilion.
That's kind of the peak of the triangle. The rest of it falls down.
Yeah, because I don't think the sort of quality hierarchy is quite as well anchored to regional distribution as well as we understand it as buyers, but as well as consumers might not necessarily understand that.
Any other thoughts there? I mean, in terms of when you're looking, I mean, from a buying perspective, I mean, is it like, oh, I need to have a wine from different appellations, or is it more a case of thinking about the quality of the wine and what it tastes like and the price? Or where does the appellation aspect come into the buying decision making?
I think as someone's mentioned before, the satellites, so a Mortagne, Saint-Emilion, a Lussac will benefit. And if it's correctly portrayed to the consumer as almost a little brother or sister, not less good, but slightly different, potentially slightly lighter, not necessarily the case, but there is an association for Lussac and for Mortagne. There's definitely the umbrella effect of Saint-Emilion. When you go further, I think Pomerol resonates, but at a super premium level. Then you're getting more into Bordeaux connoisseurs, people who love and are interested in Bordeaux. So Pomerol will resonate. But then things like Canon Fransac, which we know and we understand and we know the style, it's how you start to portray that. Now, that's not impossible, because you look at other regions around the world and how regionality has expanded. And you can go to, I'm using the New World as an idea. You can go to South Africa, which many years ago would have just been Stellenbosch, and now Swartland is known and is marketed strongly. To some degree, the rise of Southern Italy, again, it's putting benchmarks in, so it's possible. But at the moment, I think what needs to be done is not, oh, you've all changed places, sorry, not, to Dan's point, not let it be perceived as something that's not quite as good, but actually to absolutely clarify why Fransac is different from Saint-Emilion, is different from Pomerol, and that's the challenge.
Yeah, Francis, is that an issue for you when you're buying? I mean, are you looking to have a number of different wines from different appellations within your range, or is it more a case of what's the criteria?
we do, but pricing comes into it, and also the problem is going to be is that if you are in the off trade, you have a different set of issues that you're working with. If you're in the on trade and you're trying to explain these wines and you don't have a sommelier, and you're working with perhaps even the customers that you have bought a wine list and maybe don't understand the regionality of France, let alone Bordeaux sometimes. I mean, we have loads of people who do, but even in very good places, if you're dealing with a buyer who just wants a wine list, perhaps Bordeaux is not a specialization that they have. So it comes onto our wine specialist team. We have a wine team who are tasked only with selling wine, really, to sell in these wines. And we do have a range of them, and we do, as I say, go into the regionality of the right bank a bit, but with 1,300 wines on the list, there's not room for literally everything. I wish that there was, but I think the warehouse team would murder me in my sleep. Rightly so. But I think that you need the big names, and I think that you need things to sort of hang things on, and then you can try and get in the regionality from there, and you can try and expand the category that way. I'm less bothered about big names and more about the quality of the wine to a certain extent as well, because if we can put the wine in front of somebody and say, look, it's a good Bordeaux, and all you have to do is be able to communicate that on your wine list, then usually that will be enough and that will sell it, because you can then try and broaden their understanding of the wine behind it. As long as it tastes great as soon as it's in the glass, that's half the battle done for our guys. I feel like I've talked at odds with myself there a little bit, but I'm trying to get them to focus on the quality of the wine and less about trying to say you need X wine from X part of the world. I'm trying to get them to say this is a cracking wine of it's in this style. Can we put this on your list for these reasons, rather than try and do a box ticking an exercise saying, you know, you have to have a Bordeaux of this sort of price, and trying to get them to sort of rely less on the south of France, rely less on the Languedoc. I mean, there are some great wines, and the problem that we have is that the pricing is good and they're legible. They have the grapes on the labels, easy for everybody to read. Sorry, my thing is moving around a bit here, but it's you have all these barriers that we're trying to get over, and I'm trying to get the team to get around, but we're just sort of moving these problems a little bit further down the selling chain. So I can get our guys to sell it. We can get our guys to sell it into the restaurant. We need to then get the guys in the restaurants to sell it to the customers. And there's so many chains of knowledge that we have to get through there that confusing areas of appellation law become a bit meaningless and difficult to get around sometimes. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Will, can I from your with the honest grapes in terms of, like, you know, 'cause you're working on the club side there, aren't you? I mean, would you say that potentially there's more of a knowledge bank within your customers, do you think, in terms of knowing what the different appellations can offer, or not? What's the sort of the approach there?
With a lot of the current client base, yes, but most of those guys are going to be working with more almost like en primeur stuff, the fine wine end of things. A lot of the stuff that I'm tasked with doing at the moment is mainly with client base that I've worked with previously, where it's almost like the brand of Bordeaux is so strong that that's enough to get people's attention and enough to get people kind of interested. And then that is the kind of jumping point to start talking about the appellations within, kind of thing. As long as you have that kind of brand Bordeaux there, it gets the attention. I looked at our previous year's kind of offers we've done, cases we've done, etc., etc. And whenever there's a strong, regardless of appellation, whether it's a Bordeaux or for example, Burgundy kind of thing, they are always the ones which have stood out and have done better than anything more specific and anything more kind of magnified. Okay.
And Laura, I mean, when in terms of talking to students or consumers around the different sub-appellations, say of the right bank, I mean, how do you approach that? I mean, is that something that's important as part of the education piece, or?
Well, obviously it is for me, because I enjoy talking about it, and I'm hoping they'll retain something. Saint-Emilion, I think we've agreed, kind of doesn't need promoting, people know it. I'm absolutely delighted that Chateau Gaby's label says in quite big letters Grand Vin de Bordeaux, and I think it needs it. You know, it needs to say that it is from Bordeaux, because Canon Fronsac doesn't mean anything to most consumers in the UK. I'm delighted, Damien, that you are head of both Canon Fronsac and Fronsac, that you're an association together, because Fronsac, I think, even though I think the Fronsac goes a little bit under the radar of the trade, Canon Fronsac even more so. So the fact that you have that on your label, the fact that actually you as the top property in Canon Fronsac is promoting the wines, I think is helpful for everybody else, all the other chateaus there. But I think we've established that Bordeaux is, you know, a solid, good brand that even the younger generation are getting to know. So I think it's important that people, the properties of Fronsac and Canon Fronsac can't rely on their own appellations. They have to put Grand Vin de Bordeaux on as well. And also, you know, when we do tastings, Bordeaux tastings, the differences really show. You know, if you just taste a Fronsac on its own, it tastes like a Bordeaux, but when you compare it to a Saint-Emilion, or if you compare it to a basic Bordeaux or a left bank, you actually get to see the differences. And it's important, I think, to talk about Bordeaux diversity, differences.
Okay. Well, we'll start the tasting in a second. Just from Nicola's point of view, I mean, you mentioned earlier there about how Bordeaux some of the differences in terms of the investment and how important Centimillion is. I mean, are you picking up anything from some of the smaller sub-appellations in terms of interest and what's being traded, or is that still to come, do you think?
I think it's still a bit of a developing market. We are seeing the occasional trade, but it's not quite enough at the moment yet. Looking at this year's figures, it's really dominated. Bordeaux trade is really dominated by Pomerol, Centimillion, Grand Cru, and Pauillac from Left Bank. So not yet, but soon to come, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, the right bank has its fair share, I guess, amongst that. Yeah. So.
Well, yes, exactly. It is. It's Pomerol and Centimillion are the second most traded Bordeaux sub-appellations. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we got all these wines here, so we might as well.
I'm just opening the last one.
Damien, would you? I mean, we'll let's start with. Is it? I mean, I wasn't actually sure. I'm assuming we were going to go. Well, you tell us, but I mean, now should we start with your wine first? It makes sense to start with Fronsac, I guess.
Yes, as you want. Just I don't know if you prefer. Probably it's better to try the 2010 first, and after the 2012, because the difference of vintage and yeah. If you want to start with Gabi, there's no problem. I just want to say just two things. We are aware about the name of Saint-Emilion. That's why we make the group of Saint-Emilion, Pomerol, Fronsac, because Saint-Emilion is like a locomotive, a big train, and helping everybody to grow, and we are definitely very proud to be part of the Saint-Emilion area and Saint-Emilion group, because it's helping a lot the vineyards to be more well known.
Excellent. Okay. And in terms of what you let's pour the so we're going to go. So you're saying to try the 10 first, yeah? The Canon.
Yeah.
That's Chateau Cabi Canon Fronsac 2010. And so we perhaps taste that. And if you can you pick out what would be the characteristic of Fronsac compared to any other appellation if you're picking it out on a blind tasting?
On the blind tasting, the difference with Fronsac, it will be definitely the typicity of the limestone. I'm always find the fresh fruit and the mouth. The tasting is for me more fresh, definitely on the wine, and mainly on big vintage like 2010. With it's a big vintage in terms of sun and for me because it's Gabi. But
I think your signal might be going a little bit actually.
Yes, I see.
It might be worth. Do you want to perhaps if you come out and then come back in again, or you?
I think yeah. Is it okay for you?
We can hear you now. Yes, I think. Keep talking. Keep talking, and then we can tell you.
Yeah. All of the countries, the signal is not very. So Fronsac for me, it's more lots of character and of tannins. Sorry, very fruity because another time the mellow and the freshness of the limestone, because there's a lot of limestone on all the hills here. So
okay. Yeah, and for 2010, it is, as you say, it's got that real nice, crisp, brightness in the mouth, isn't it?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on this particular wine, or is this typical of Fronsac for you in terms of the panel?
I think it is a panel. So yeah, it is a panel because the terroir is quite strong here. So we are making strong wine. So that's why I was talking just before about changing a little bit of things in terms of winemaking to make it more approachable, young. So we changed our way of winemaking since 25 last year. And yes, the tannins are very present, and the fruits are opulent, and it's normally more like black fruit as red fruit, and it's very solid wine. Yeah.
Well, what kind of things are you doing the winemaking without being too technical? But what aspects are you?
We changed. I changed my way. After 2009, I worked 7 years in South Africa, and because the previous owner was South African, and I saw different type of winemaking in South Africa, and it was very interesting in terms of technical things for a guy like me who work and learn in Bordeaux. I changed a few things, so I'm making a lot of pumping over here. Sorry, not pumping over. That's not the term I want to. Punch down. Yeah. Punch down. And in terms of ripening, looking more after the time of maturity in the vines. So harvesting a little bit earlier with a better acidity and pH, and after the temperature of fermentation are very important. So we are playing a lot with the temperature of fermentation during the extraction period. So before we move to 30-32 Celsius in terms of fermentation, and now we are more between 24 to 26. So helping a lot for having more round and more fine and delicate wine.
Okay, and just to say, we've picked up some of the prices for these wines actually, which I can send you separately. But I think this wine is around £50 retail. If that's this is just some research we were doing this morning, but
yeah.
To be confirmed. But I think it's about £50 anyway. That particular wine. Any thoughts from the panel, just in terms of where that sits with the style and what people are looking for? And
well, for me, it's a really typical Canon Fronsac style. It's richer than a lot of Saint-Emilions. It's darker in colour. It's delicious, really chocolatey and smooth, and yeah, top example of the appellation.
I think you're right, Laura. I mean, my notes say I've always thought this way about the Fronsac, Canon Fronsac. You know, quite meaty, quite intense. I wrote an interesting note here because I said you have an element, it's quite muscular at the start, but actually, and in the old the old days, years past, there would have been a lot more tannin on the finish. But what I really liked about it is that there is a degree of muscularity with that intense meatiness, but the finish is actually really fresh. The finish lifts because you've got that lighter style, you've got the cooler fermentation, you've got the acidity and that fresher style, which people are looking for, which is coming through. And yet you've kept, as you say to your word, the level of opulence. So I think, you know, the balance is actually really interesting.
And for those who have tasted the 2018, any thoughts in terms of how that's evolved? I mean, I know obviously they're completely different in terms of their age, so that's but for those who did taste the 18, any thought on that as well in terms of how that compares, or if it keeps that freshness and taking on what Damien was saying in terms of this change in winemaking?
Yeah, my notes for the 18 when I tasted them just before we jumped on the Zoom here, that it was sort of similar characteristics in that it's sort of darker fruit, bit sort of firmer, a bit more structure. but really sort of quite intense. So you can sort of see where that's got to in a nice sort of warm, hot vintage like 18 with all of that sort of intensity of fruit, darkness. That sort of follows through in the 10, but it's sort of a lot softer. Yeah, it's evolved really interestingly.
Any other thoughts? What's
of the 18, I thought it felt a little bit more directional. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but I take what everybody was saying about the structure and the rest of it, but I just felt like it was a bit more focused, which I really liked.
I think that the 18, I think the price point there is around £40. Again, we can confirm these, but does that sound right, Damien?
Yeah. It's in France here it's 35. So yeah, I'm sure it's between 40 and 50 pounds here.
Okay, and do you have a UK distributor at the moment, or?
Yes, I'm working with a friend. He's got a little negoce called Wine Story.
Wine Story, okay. So what's the plan? Where would you recommend next in terms of what we taste? To be in terms of, I know we jumped in up from.
Sorry, Richard, I'm so sorry, Richard. Can I interrupt? Can I just ask Damien about has your oak treatment changed?
Yes, you're right. In 2010, it was 70% of new oak, and aging was 12 months. And since 2012, I changed 50% new oak every vintages and 24 months aging. So on the 2018, sorry, it's 24 months aging, French oak, blonde toast. So no big toast. It's very light. It's more as a white barrels as a red barrel for red. Yes, and I change more and more the quantity of wood year after year, just because the elevation of alcohol contains and try to get more freshness. So we start amphora since 2 years, and the good blending at time is 10% of amphora. So since 2020, Gabi will have 10% of amphora and 50% of new oak and after aged barrels. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is amphora something which is becoming more and more common across Bordeaux in terms of what people are using, looking different vessels to?
Yes, I think it's it's helping to keep fresh fruit. It's a new style of aging, so it's a little bit fashion. It's not only just a question of aging, but it's very interesting in terms of wine construction. If you compare barrels and if you compare amphora, and I'm not 100% fan of 100% wine in amphora. I like the blending with barrels, just to give the fresh aromas and the croquant. How do you say croquant? Crispy fruit. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay. And so, what do you recommend we taste next? Then, where should we?
Probably the Saint-Émilion Grand Cru, and after the Lussac, if it's fine with you.
The Moulin Gallo.
Moulin Gallo, yes. Sorry.
So the Moulin Gallo 2010.
Yeah.
Do you have any background on this particular producer?
Yes, I take few notes. So it's a 2.25 hectare. So it's a small vineyard. 95% Merlot, 5% Cab Franc. It's 100% New Oak and 18 months aging. and it's on clay and limestone.
This is a nice chunky Bordeaux breakfast.
I'm glad you penciled this in for 10 o'clock in the morning, Richard.
I know, I'm sorry, I know.
It's apéro for me. So. it's
And in terms of what's a typical sort of style for Grand Cru, I mean, is this what people would be expecting? Price point, by the way, for this is I think £25.
okay.
I think just in general, from a sort of on the shop floor anecdotal thing, a lot of consumers are slightly confused between Saint-Emilion quality levels in terms of Grand Cru and Grand Cru Classe and all sorts of stuff, because you can get pretty much every price point as Saint-Emilion Grand Cru.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. You sort of get what you pay for system with some of the quality things. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Grand Cru is going to be expensive premium wine. And I think that sort of confuses customers a little bit when you see a Lussac Saint-Emilion that's sort of 20 quid a bottle, and you can see a Saint-Emilion Grand Cru that's cheaper. That you can't, unless you really understand the mechanics of the region, you can't understand why price doesn't necessarily equate to what the label makes you think, or the sort of implied quality level on the label.
Yeah. Because the 2010 is 25, and then the 2018 is £35. So again, I don't know if anybody had a chance to taste the 18s, what kind of evolution we're seeing in the wine there, or thoughts on how that's developed or changed.
I thought well, I've just tasted the 2010, which, very rich and sumptuous dark berries. The tannins are still, despite the age, they're well. There's always one expression in French which I can never get the English for, but Damien, bien fondu.
Bien fondu. Yeah.
So it's well melted, integrated, but it's and yeah, rich and sumptuous. My notes on the 2018 is, again, you can see the pattern. It's concentrated, it's plump, and it's rich. But again, I'm seeing that high level of freshness, the slightly lighter style coming through. So I see the family pattern between the two vintages, but the 18 has got that, that acidity, freshness lift on the finish, which to me is a positive.
Okay.
I don't know if the others agree.
It just seems to me that the oak is still really noticeable in the 10, and obviously it was in the 18 too, but not. You feel that it's going to balance out a little bit more, and really lively tannins in the 18. I thought this is drinking absolutely now, whereas the Gabby, I felt you've still got plenty of time with that 2010, whereas this one I feel you need to enjoy it now in the next couple of years. So.
And in terms of Grand Cru, picking what Dan was saying there, Laura, what's your thoughts in terms of how you?
Yeah. I mean, it's an appellation. It's not a classification. The Grand Cru. It's Saint-Emilion Grand Cru AOC. It's a difficult one to explain. It's really complicated. All of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
some of it is to do with just having being able to host guests and being able to do the tourist thing. That's one of the criteria for being a Grand Cru. So I mean, it's not all to do with quality, even though it should be.
Yeah, which I guess is why there is that sort of price disparity. Any other thoughts on this particular one, or should we move on to? Where did you want to go next?
The next one will be Légérie. Oops.
Is where, sorry?
Next one will be that one, Légérie.
Oh, okay, yeah, fair enough. Lussac, Saint-Emilion.
Yeah.
Sorry, my daughter's trying to phone me.
Ask her what she thinks of Lussac, Saint-Emilion.
Yeah, well.
So where does Lussac sit in then in terms of the Saint-Emilion criteria or ladder?
Sorry, excuse me.
How would you describe Lussac in terms of how it differentiates, or what it is about?
Lussac for me, it's very close to the northeast of Saint-Emilion, and there's a lot of elevation too. It's not flat, so there's a lot of hills too, and so I need to look after what I write because I don't want to make mistake. So Lussac is one of the largest appellation with montagne, and in terms of soils, there's a big diversity because there's some limestone, there's some clay, and there's some sand, limon, sandy soils too. So there's a big diversity in terms of terroir. So in terms of complexity, it's very interesting. So that's why for me, it's very close to Saint-Emilion. Yeah.
It's a big, I would say it's a big diversity and quality of the wines as well.
Yeah, but
I think that's true, but I think you can get really good value from this region.
Sure, yeah.
100%.
Like this one.
Actually, this wine here, I think, is retail is £10.
The 2018 or the 10?
Or both actually.
Yeah.
Again, we can clarify, we can confirm these prices. As I say, we were picking it up this morning, but they're both £10. Yeah.
One of mine's corked.
Oh, sorry.
Which one? The posh one?
2018.
So I think there's a humongous difference between these two in the 2018 and the 2010. The 18 in my notes is really pretty, really fresh, really juicy, quite playful almost, really fun, really approachable, easygoing style of Bordeaux. I could probably have this on the shelf for 10 or 11 quid and it would do really, really well. Whereas 2010 for me is just sort of a bit chunky and a bit chewy and a bit it's much more sort of broody and intense. It feels like the winemaking style has changed quite a bit between the two wines.
You're right.
The new branding, like the label is different for the 18 and stuff. It feels like they're trying to make a younger, fresher, more modern style, whereas the 2010 feels quite old school, quite classic, quite traditionally made.
Quite tannin dominated.
Yeah. The 10 is really chunky and clunky, whereas the 18 is really fleshy and ripe.
Yeah, it's that evolution which is all about, what it's all about, but it really does come through between those two.
Massively.
Yeah.
Yes, and that wine is a small production on a large estate because the Chateau Chéreau it's 29 hectares, and they are only producing 10,000 bottles of Égérie. So it's a special cuvée on the estate on Chateau Chéreau. And you're probably right in terms of winemaking changement because I think the father left the daughter makes the wine since a few years now, and probably a changement in terms of style and more focused on fruity wine and more approachable wine. Yeah.
Will, is Lussac Saint-Emilion, is that an area that you bought from much before?
Yeah, it's always been a region that we've kind of seen as somewhere to find good value, and hearing the prices for this, I think that just reaffirms that. It's always one of those places that you're not going to be disappointed if you spend 10-15 quid on something. It's always going to be a good, safe bet.
And is it because the area is so large that the prices are so low? I mean, what is it about? Because obviously you still have a Saint-Emilion name. I mean, in terms of a consumer's perspective, there's quite a big drop down to £10 compared to the other ones that we're tasting here.
I think it's more a question of name. Lussac Saint-Emilion, Montagne Saint-Emilion, Puisseguin Saint-Emilion. The name Saint-Emilion is on the label, but it's not pure Saint-Emilion. So it will be the same if we put Fronsac Saint-Emilion or something like that, because it's just a large appellation. You're right. It's more than total near 6,000 hectares, something like that. And Saint-Emilion is another time make a very good marketing job in terms of name, and it's difficult for the other little appellation around to be at the same level. So that's another time. That's why we believe on the group Saint-Emilion, Pomerol, Fronsac, because Saint-Emilion help everybody to go up. Yeah.
Can I just say there about the pricing of those three that we've just tasted, whether the pricing is correct, the structure is definitely correct. I think in terms of the quality of each of the wines, the Lussac is not as good as the Saint-Emilion Grand Cru, and the Saint-Emilion Grand Cru wasn't as good as the Gabby from my point of view. So I think that, what do we say, 10, 11 pounds, 25, do we say? I can't remember, and then 50. To me, that's the right ladder in terms of the quality that we've tasted.
Yeah,
so sometimes it works.
Yeah, so it's like, Lussac £10, the Grand Crus were sort of 25, 35, and the Canon Fronsacs were 40, 50. So
I think that stretching of price points going from 10 to 50 quite quickly in Bordeaux is really interesting. How many different properties there are and how many different styles of wine, different producers there are making wines from 10 to 50 pounds. £50 is not a difficult number to get to from a property in Bordeaux. There's absolutely heaps of £50 wines. Whereas, how many other regions in the world can boast such diversity at £50 as such diversity at £10? You can get from 10 to 50 so quickly, whereas not many other regions can do that.
I've got in my notes here, so there's something like 800 chateaux just within Saint-Emilion itself, which level of competition is crazy. I mean, it's
just so many properties. I think that makes it harder for consumers to latch on to a particular producer or a particular property or an estate, because Bordeaux is so clearly the sort of marketing angle of the region. But for such a small region to have so many producers, that it's really hard to go, oh, actually, I like that one producer of that one Bordeaux that I had that one time. And to actually find that again can often be quite hard.
Yeah.
And depends the strategy, the technical strategy. So it costs more money to make more details, little plus to make the wine different, because you have to having more equipment, making more work on the vineyards, looking after your yields if you want to make more concentration or not. So at the end, there's a lot of things who are making the price different in terms of production cost, and that's probably why if you look after the different production costs and the different strategy in terms of techniques and the different strategy in terms of marketing, I think the three things are making the price different at the end. So there's wines for everybody. That's the things who are nice in Bordeaux. So if you want something more full body or more fruity on the same appellation, you are able to find it. So it's not something sorry, rigid, yeah.
Rigid, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And okay, so as you move on to the next
Yeah.
recap, if you want to go
So
to,
after we moved to 2012 vintage, so probably start with Château de Viau, La Lande de Pomerol.
Lalande de Pomerol, yeah.
Yeah.
Chateau de Villon. Okay.
Heavy bottles.
Yeah. So Château de Viau is one of the largest and oldest vineyard in La Lande de Pomerol. It's 21 hectares, 85% Merlot, 15% Cabernet Franc, and 18 months aging in barrels. And in terms of terroir, it's clay and gravel. So sorry, my explanation are very very short, but I tried to get some information from my colleague, and yeah, and I don't want to be too much academic.
And did with Chateau de Villon, what kind of size of property did you say? Sorry.
21 hectares.
Okay. And how would that compare in terms of within Pomerol itself, in terms of what would be an average, the average of the size?
I think in Pomerol the average is it's probably a little bit low, but in La Lande de Pomerol, if I look after the La Lande de Pomerol, it's 1,150 hectares in total for 155 vineyards. So it's around 7 hectares in average. Yeah. And for Pomerol, it's 800 hectares for 125 vineyards.
Okay.
So,
any guesses on the price point here then? Because the 18 and the 12 are, but there's £2 difference between the two. But any thoughts on where this might sit?
£20.
How much?
20.
Very good. So the 18 is £20 and the 2012 is £22. Well done, Laura.
The heavy bottle might have suggested higher.
I'm going to say they are heavy, aren't they? It's not going to win too many favours.
Not going to help carbon footprint on the sustainability issue.
No.
Good wine though, it's got really
I think it's delicious.
good complexity. Really, I mean, it's fine. It's got licorice and the black fruit and showing some age, tertiary complexity. It's really
Very generous, very succulent.
Yeah.
A lot of sweet, ripe fruit streaming through it. Almost kind of voluptuous style. Very generous.
Francis, is this the kind of wine that interests yourselves, or whether there's the kind of wine? What do you think? What do you think of the wine?
Fruit, I thought they were lovely and elegant, and as we've said, there was a freshness, but the fruit was really attractive and appealing. And I think things like that sort of are immediately quite expressive do really well in general in the on-trade.
Yeah. Will this be quite typical of what we would expect from Pomerol or from La Lande de Pomerol?
I think it's it is the very good level of La Lande de Pomerol. For me, La Lande de Pomerol is more fruity in terms of freshness and pure fruit. But just because here I think there's a big work in terms of aging in barrels. So you have the toasty aromas coming, but it's very rich. It's very nice. I think that one is very good. But for me, the character of La Lande de Pomerol is more red fruit. But it's my opinion. I don't know if I'm right.
Mm-hmm. It's a very, very good price.
Mm.
Do you know
Yeah.
if that one's in the UK? Does that have UK distribution? Do you know? No.
No.
Okay. Should we? So, are we going back into Saint-Emilion now? I think.
Yeah, we go back to Montagne Saint-Emilion to Chateau Obono, 2012.
What distinguishes Montagne Saint-Emilion versus
In terms of tasting?
in terms of the region and in terms of the appellation, in terms of the difference between Lussac or
So it's nearly the same size as Lussac. Sorry, I take my notes. Yes, because Montagne it's 1,600 hectares. Sorry, so it's close to Lussac. In terms of terroir, there's more clay and sand soil on the back of the little hills, and few clay and limestone soil. And Obono, it's a 10 hectares property. 80% Merlot, 20% Cabernet Franc, and 12 months in barrels.
Oh.
Can I ask about the Cabernet Franc, Damien? Is there more being planted in the right bank? Let's fingers crossed. We all seem to love Cabernet Franc.
Sorry, I don't have the start of your question. Sorry.
I wondered if is there more being planted in?
Yes. More and more vineyards thinking about planting more Cabernet Franc, just because with the global warming, the Cabernet Franc is for me is got more future as other grape variety. I'm talking about type of terroir. I'm not saying Merlot is finished. I'm sure Merlot is got a good future if you are planting the grape, the Merlot on the right soil with a good exposition. But Cabernet Franc is able to go everywhere, and if you put Cabernet Franc another time, that's why I'm doing here. If you put Cabernet Franc on the hills in limestone, it's just fantastic. Yeah.
The winemaker at Cheval Blanc said that his ambition is to make 100% Cabernet Franc Cheval Blanc in his lifetime. Do you think he will?
I don't know if Mr. Arnaud wants to do that, but to change the character of Cheval Blanc. But no, it's for me it's a very good grape variety. Yeah.
So in terms of this particular wine, any thoughts on the pricing? The 18 and the 12 are the same price actually.
Okay.
Comes
10
in
to
at
12.
a little bit higher this time. It's
It's about 18, 20.
Yeah, 18. Why good, Angela? Yes.
I think it's lovely.
Yeah.
I mean,
For that price, it's very good.
I'm a huge fan of that style, and the Cabernet. Well, I made my views clear on Cabernet Franc earlier, and it just brings that gorgeous kind of raspberry freshness and lift. Very elegant, very stylish.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites of the day. Actually, that's really, it's yeah. And in between the two vintages, I mean, what we're picking up there?
But again, I sort of much prefer that sort of plusher, riper, younger, slightly more fruit forward style of the 18s. You know, for me, these wines 2012, they're sort of 11 years old. I'd rather have had it sort of 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
But
I'm
that's just
finding-
sort of
I'm
preference.
finding this a bit simplistic. I thought the 18 was lovely and really had some beautiful drinkability, actually.
I would happily have the 18 now. It's great.
Yeah.
I was just retasting it. It tastes really lovely, really fleshy, really
Yeah.
ripe. But sort of 4 or 5 years old, it's tasting really lovely. Whereas the 12 for me, I'd have probably had it a couple of years ago. I think it was at it.
Yeah, it's just falling away. But
It's just sort of starting to, isn't it?
as you say, the 2018, you know, it's sumptuous dark cherries, and it has got that richness. But it's again, I just keep going back to the word freshness, which sort of seems through this one definitely.
But that is a key thing, I guess. I know for Bordeaux overall is this idea of having wines that can be drinking younger. You know, coming into the market earlier, and you know, particularly for the on-trade. You know, it's something which it's become a really important part for the whole region, I suppose, as well.
And we're talking about 2018s that are 4 years old.
True,
So,
yeah.
you know, new world wines, you drink them within a couple of years. And so we've actually got 4 years aging, and some of them should be drinking. And that one for me, the 18 was absolutely beautiful for drinking now. Perfect.
Yeah. And I know there's been a lot of work with organics and biodynamics right across Bordeaux, but within the right bank, Damien, is that also something which has been a lot of work around organics?
Yes,
as well?
yes. It's something going up every year. If we are looking after the different appellation on the right bank, so Saint-Emilion, Pomerol, and Fronsac. In Fronsac, we are at more than 30% of bio and biodynamic vineyards. And I think it is nearly the same in all the Saint-Emilion and Pomerol parts, between 20 and 30% of organic and biodynamic certification. And after, I know that the goal for all the group is to move nearly all the vineyards to 100% of certification. I'm not talking about organic and biodynamic, but I know that soon as you are looking after certification, and as soon as you are going to the first step of certification, at the end you finish to something like organic, not biodynamic, but organic is the next step, because you understand that there's easy things to do, and it's not so hard to go to organic viticulture.
You have Chateau de la Dauphine leading the way in biodynamic there in the right bank, don't you?
Yeah. Sure. So in Fronsac, we are very active in terms of bio and biodynamic. Gabi, we are biodynamic since 2 years. So we don't have a label. I'm asking for Biodivin, but we are not certified by Demeter or something like that. But we moved to biodynamic since 2 years. And and it's changing completely our way of thinking, and we come back to a real agriculture, observation, and trying to be to not be late with the climate. Yeah.
I was actually going to, I know we've got one more wine to taste, but on my list of points to make was, you know, you're talking about organic and biodynamic. I wanted to highlight sustainability, because without a doubt, sustainability is the most uttered word, not just in wine, but right across everything, really, without a doubt. And Richard, I don't have the stats to hand, but I've got them. I can send them to you if of use, because I've done quite a lot of work in this area. And I think it's 25, it's not the exact figure, but 25% of, and I'm talking obviously off trade, I'm talking retail consumers, but actually those retail consumers go out to dinner in restaurants, so it crosses both. It might be higher than that. Around 25% of people are influenced in their purchase choice because of sustainability, be that methods of production, be that packaging, be that recycling, be that anything. Richard, just let me know if you want the stats, because
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, definitely.
I've got them. And I think that's one thing that, particularly in your, in the brochure that you sent, that's something that comes across, and I was reading this yesterday, comes across really, really strongly. And yeah. I'm not saying it's the answer, but if sustainability is at the heart of conversations about most things, that could just be another hook for the wines of your area, because there is such a strong pull on that. There is such a strong mission to develop that side of things. I'm not talking about the packaging in this case, particularly not with the very heavy bottle, but in terms of your vineyard practices, your winemaking practices, then it's a hook that, going back to the younger generation, certainly it's less relevant to the older generation, but the younger generation, oh yes, sustainability, as you know, we all know, and those of us who've got children know even better, it's absolutely fundamental to them.
Angela, I was going to say exactly the same thing.
Thank you.
It needs to be marketed. I think it will be a help.
Yeah, I have it in my notes as well that sustainable is more important than bio or organic.
No, you can't just copy what I said now.
I'm sorry. Well, we're all on the same page. It's nice to hear that everyone's
they're just following you under
things. Is that when I'm buying for the range, it being TIC certified organic is to me slightly less important than what are they doing sort of holistically.
Yeah. If you talk to any, again, in my world, in retail, if you talk to any retailer, the sustainability strategy is at the core of all their supplier relationships now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I've managed to do some work with other parts of Bordeaux as well, and as Demi was saying, the targets and the goals they have are incredibly ambitious, and it's great to see, because obviously the whole world looks at Bordeaux. So I think it's potentially for Bordeaux, it's a real putting a big flag in the ground.
I think it's
I'm aware of our time, actually, because I know people may have things to get on and do, but I think we've got the one more wine to do, which certainly not. So
it's fine.
The best to last, but I don't know. But we're now into the Grand Cru
Classé
for Saint-Emilion, which Rochebelle. If you can introduce that wine, and we can taste that, and then we can look to.
So Chateau Rochebelle, it's 3 hectares vineyard, 85% Merlot, 15% Cap Franc. Average for age for the vines, it's 40 years. It's all on a limestone area on the top of Saint-Emilion. 80% new oak, 12 months aging.
And the price points for this one quite different, actually, in terms of the two vintages, but The 2018 is £55 and the 2012 is £40.
I think it's amazing that quite often with these sorts of wines, you can pick up older, mature vintages today for less than the current vintage.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting from a sort of investment-y point of view, where unless you're spending loads of money, you can quite often pick these wines up for not a lot more today than they were when you paid for them 10 years ago. And so it's really interesting that the 2012 is more accessible price-wise than the 2018 is today.
And do we know what that is?
I just think there's sort of secondary market. Well, Nicola will know more about this than I will, but there's the secondary market and the resale value of sort of £50 bottles of Centimillion that people don't necessarily know. It's sort of much harder to trade than, you know, bottles of Le Pen or Petrus.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dan. I suspect also, you know, Entrepreneur might be playing a big part with some of these wines and what prices they're initially released at. You know, you look back to 2010 when the market was probably at its peak and the release prices back then was so high. I imagine, you know, they've come down a lot since. And then you compare to, you know, wines like, what was it, 2019 that were released right during the COVID pandemic, that were all massively discounted and have since risen in price. So it's fascinating to see how the market kind of changes. And, you know, ultimately, I guess, you know, people will pay what they think they're worth. And, you know, it's an interesting point, though. I do find it fascinating that
one of the fun things with the Bordeaux investment is that it is a market and everything fluctuates, and buying things at the right time and the right moment. And 2019 is in the middle of COVID when everyone needed the cash. Just means that in 10 years' time, people are going to make a lot of money out of those wines, not because they're better. They might not necessarily taste better. They might not have as much, you know, consumer preference. Oh, these 19s are drinking brilliantly. Like, that's, from an investment point of view, that's not necessarily the debate people are having. They're like, oh, I picked them up for cheap in the middle of COVID, is the reason they're making money, not because the wines are more desirable than the 2020s or the 18s.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as I say, we're out of time, and appreciate people may have things to get onto. But just to sort of wrap up, really, I mean, just perhaps some final thoughts, really, just in terms of, I mean, I suppose it's been quite an interesting exercise to be able to taste so many different appellations and the back vintages. I mean, like sort of final thoughts, really, around the theme around the evolution of Bordeaux, but in particularly the right bank. You know, perceptions in terms of like your final thoughts, really, on where we see the wines going and what potential there is. I mean, perhaps Laura, if I come to you for that first.
Well, it was a fascinating exercise, and as you say, different appellations, right bank appellations, different vintages, really good to experience. And what I'm seeing is that the modern vintages, just like actually even the entry-level Bordeaux has never been so good, basically. We have never been able to buy Bordeaux with the consistency of quality that we are doing at the moment. And I think that proved it with the 18s that we tasted here. They were a joy. And yes, some of them will age, but a lot of them were really good for drinking now as well. So to me, they're ticking a whole lot of boxes.
Yeah.
I think it's part of that sort of winemaker's preference and sort of stylistic intentions when they're actually making the wine, is that when they're making the 2010s and the 2012s, or 10 years ago, they were making them to age. Whereas when winemakers are making 2018 and 2020 in sort of warm, sunny vintages, they're at some of their price points, you know, sort of sub 20, they're making the wines to be enjoyed and drunk a lot younger. So they're focusing on fruit and freshness and plushness and lower tannins and more sweet, jammy, juicy fruit, rather than making wines that have spent, you know, 24, 40 months in oak, 100% new oak, that are designed to be drunk sort of 10 or 15 years down the line, like they were making in sort of 2010.
Good. Okay. Nicola, I know you didn't have a chance to actually taste the wines, but just in terms of your final thoughts, really, just in terms of how you're seeing Bordeaux evolve and the market changing, perhaps some thoughts there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming to me. And sorry I didn't get to taste the wines. I've written loads of notes and I'm looking forward to tasting them later. I think for us, Bordeaux remains a huge part of the secondary market. It is the most traded region on the platform, and I don't think that's going to change. We're obviously, it's going to stay constant, and we're obviously seeing other regions come go in fashion, but Bordeaux's, always there. And we are just seeing, buyers searching for value within the region itself and looking to other sub-appellations, and that's part of the reason why there's been much more growth in Saint-Emilion and right bank trade as well. So yeah, it's fascinating, and more wines are trading than ever before from the region. So I think there are some massive positives to take for Bordeaux's secondary market performance.
Excellent, thank you. Angela, what would be your final thoughts?
I support a lot of what's been said, and I agree with Laura. There was a brilliant range, and in itself it showed diversity within the right bank. Some key things for me is, yes, sustainability is a core message that you can really, really drive hard. Another word I would use is accessibility. It's evident in the 2018s that the style is moving that way. And therefore, by making the wine styles more relevant and more accessible, you're going to attract that key consumer, the children of the 90s and the millennials coming in, who want that style. So you're going to, you've got a bigger chance of developing the younger consumer, which, let's face it, is the direction it's, by the law of science is going to go. You've got the focus on elegance, you've got accessibility, you've got modern thinking now behind the winemaking, which will appeal to that younger generation who are starting to come through the ranks. So I would say, develop the younger generation accessibility and what they want, and push the sustainability message.
Excellent, thank you. And Damien, thanks for introducing all the wines and taking us through the right bank. What will be your takeaways from what you've heard this morning?
It was my first experience on Visio and tasting, so sorry if I was a little bit disorganized. I need to improve for the next one. I tried to explain things. I hope my English was good. Sometimes I want to explain things, but the French, it's too strong for me and I can't explain in English. No, it was great. Thanks to everybody, because it's very important to listen your opinion and your thinking about Bordeaux. It's quite hard at Bordeaux, in Bordeaux at time. So it's nice to hear some opinions, some advice, and thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, take care. Thank you. Well, I'm going to say from my point of view, I think it's great that we've had the opportunity to have this debate, because often when we talk about Bordeaux, we talk about Bordeaux in the main, and to actually have the chance to actually drill down into all these different appellations and actually really got to get to explore different styles, and particularly looking back across the two different vintages have been really interesting exercise. So thanks everybody for your time. I think Francis and Will have nicked off to go and buy some Bordeaux wines, but anyway, thanks very much indeed, and enjoy the rest of your day, and enjoy these wines over Christmas.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thank
Thank you for having us.